going on, guys? So we got the cylinder head back from the machine shop. It is looking good, it is beautiful, and now we are ready to install the cams. So first thing we're going to be doing is clearing a nice spot on the table, and I have a set of books here that we're going to be laying the cylinder head on top of. Because when you install the cams, it opens a set of the valves. You don't want the head to be resting on the face, so when you actually start pushing the valves open, it'll try and lift the head or something will break. So we're basically going to be putting the books on the top and the bottom to the point where there will be space underneath here for the valves to open freely without having any interference with the table that you're working on. So now we have the head sitting on the books, and as you can see, there's a nice little space underneath the cylinder head, and none of the valves are laying on anything, so free to open as much as they want without hitting the table. Tools we will be using: 3/8 driver, 11mm socket, an adjustable crescent wrench. Supposedly a 22mm works on the cam for holding the cam in position. That's what this guy is for. We're going to be holding the cam in position so it doesn't slip around. 22mm, mine doesn't fit on the cam, so I'm using an adjustable crescent wrench. And some engine assembly lube. We will be lubing the lobes, the lifters, and the bearing caps for the cam on install. So when the engine turns over the first time, it'll have something to run off of besides just metal on metal. It'll have this little bit of assembly lube there, and it'll run off the assembly lube until the oil system takes over and actually pumps oil to the top end of the motor. And a torque wrench. So before we put the lifters on, there's one thing to note. The lifters and the bearing caps are all labeled. You can see, so that one says A7 right there. So your bearing caps are labeled 1 through 7, A1 through 7, and E1 through 7. So the A bearing caps are the exhaust side, and the E is the intake side. Same thing with the trays. You can see that tray right there has an A on it, so that is the exhaust side tray. So before we put the trays in, I'm going to go ahead and put some assembly lube right in the center of the lifter there, on that little shiny part where the lifter contacts the valve spring, just to make sure that that guy has some lube on the initial startup. I'm just going to go down the line, give those guys a little dot each. Every lifter on both trays. Here we go, that's all of them. Okay, so now the fun part becomes putting the tray onto the cylinder head without dropping all the lifters. And on a lot of forums and a lot of other DIY videos, they'll have little earth magnets that they'll stick on the bottom of each lifter, and then they'll tack a welding rod across the whole thing to hold them in place. And that works actually pretty brilliantly, but I don't have any magnets and I don't have a welding rod. So what I like to do is I will take some packaging tape like this, and I'm going to string out a piece a little bit longer than the tray. And from here, we are going to fold this guy in half. Alright, so there we go. We got a little piece folded in half. So I'm going to set it over the lifters, and the key is to keep it very taut. The tighter you can keep it, the more they will stay in. So this is the tray for the exhaust side. Hold it very tightly. Set it on, and right as it starts taking load onto the lifters, we're going to lift it up a little bit. Slide the tape out, and you're going to want to make sure that the tray sits flat against the head. So it has these little notches, little trade guides on these two and on these two that the tray needs to sit in. So there's one of the guides, and as you can tell, some of the other ones, most of the other ones do not have it. And on the tray, this hole where a guide sit is larger than the remainder of the holes. Alright, so now we're going to drop the intake side on. Boom. There we go. We're going to make sure that it is sitting in its little guides. Okay, so from here we're going to be cleaning the bearing journals for camshafts on the trays itself. I already cleaned the lifters and everything else in the cleaning video. If you didn't do that, make sure to go check that out and clean before you put the cams back on. So I'm going to use a little bit of brake clean, brace them on there, run over this guy with a nice microfiber, make sure that there are no dirt or dust in the bearings. Okay, so from here we are going to lubricate the lifters and bearing caps and the bearings here and the cam. But before we do that, I want to cover installing the cams and the method used to install it compared to removing it. If you watched my camshaft removal video, most of the video was me explaining the concept of removing the cams, getting it in that sweet spot. Right? These 6-cylinder cams are very long and they're very strong but also very brittle. So to take them off and to put them on, I use the single bearing cap method. Bearing cap number 2 for cylinder 1. If you didn't watch my cam removal video, go watch that just for the concept of removing and installing the cams. So it's basically removing the cam backwards. It's the same technique. You want to find that sweet spot on the lobes where only cylinder 1 is pushing down on the valve springs, right? You want to sort of have cylinder number 1, the lobes oriented almost straight down. A little bit cocked to the side, but it's pretty much straight down. So you want to have the lobes facing straight down when you put it on. Like in my cam removal video, it's a little bit harder to find the sweet spot when installing the cams versus taking them off, because you can rotate the lifters, all of them out right now, but as you start wrenching the cam down, you're going to have to sort of play with the lifters to make sure that you can rotate them and adjust cam rotation accordingly. So it's a little bit more of a trick than taking them off, but it's not too bad. So for now, we're going to lubricate the bearings and the lobes as well as the lifters. And another thing, like I said, the bearing caps are labeled 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all the way down the line, and the procedure is the exact same for the exhaust side. I'm going to take my engine assembly lube and I'm going to run it on the bearings and put a bunch on the lifters. So all the way down the line. One thing to be aware of is don't get any assembly lube on the surface of the tray, and don't get any on the section that it mates to on the bearing cap. Just get it on the inner race of the bearing cap. Don't get it on any of the surfaces that get bolted down to. So I'm going to flip over the bearing caps. I'm all nice and lubed up. Same deal with the cam. We're going to go all the way around each one. A nice coat of lube. And we're going to be doing the cam lobes as well. Those beautiful little eggs, nice and wet. There is never too much lube. Here we go. All nice and lubricated. So now I'm going to place it, the lobes for cylinder number 1, sort of a little bit off to the side. Okay, so we got the cam on. We're going to be dropping bearing cap E number 2 on. Now do note that when you're facing the intake side, the bearing caps technically go upside down. So this E2 should be facing that way. So we're going to push it down a little bit. Notice that the cam lobes are facing out that way so we can get some threads out and put our nuts on to the threads. So from here, we're going to take our wrench, put it over the cam, and we are going to rotate the cam down onto cylinder number 1, so the lobes are pointing straight into the lifters, and I can see that the lifters are compressed and the valves are actually a tiny bit open right now. So this is exactly where we want to hold the cam. So none of the other lifters have preload on them. Cylinder number 5 will have a little bit, but it looks like it shouldn't be too bad. So we're going to go take our 11mm and our 3/8 and we're going to slowly work this guy on, a quarter turn at a time. and it will slowly bring the cam down. And you want to keep a firm grip on the wrench on the camshaft in case it decides to try and move, which would be bad. Okay, so that's on pretty tight. So from here, we are going to drop the rest of the bearing caps on. E1, E2, E3, E4, and number 7. And now we're going to start throwing on the little nuts. And be sure that you do align these guys up in proper order. So 1 through 7, don't get them mixed up. Bearing journals layer match evenly. So it'll sort of be like putting the left shoe on your right foot sort of thing. It's just, and wear the cam unevenly, it's just bad form. So make sure that those guys are proper. Okay, so from here, we're just going to run them all down. Be sure to hold the cam while you're doing this. The cam might still try and move on you. And once they're all hand tight, we're going to go in and tighten all these guys down. Don't get them ridiculously tight because we are going to torque them, but do get them nice and snug. There we go. Okay, from here these guys get 11 foot-pounds or 132 inch-pounds. And I'm just going to go down the line and torque them. There we go. So that cam is in place now. He is set where we want him to be. And we just got to flip the head around and do the other side. And that right there is an open set of valves. So as you can see, that exceeds the face of the head. So if we laid it down just on the face, that's why we have the books there, is because it would have opened, it would have had to fight the weight of the head to open those valves, and something bad could have happened. Same deal once again. Get those bearings, lifters, and the cam all nice and lubed. Alright, so we drop the cam on. And now, because we have the cylinder head rotated this way, all of our A caps are actually going to be facing straight up. So you want the numbers and letters to sort of be on the inner side of the cam, so I can read A2 straight and I can read E2 straight, so they're in a line. We're going to do the same method. We're going to rotate the cam out of the way so I can get the bearing cap on there. I'm going to put a couple turns on these nuts right here. The lobes for 1 are facing basically straight down. Slowly walk it down. Take your time. Probably make sure that your tray is sitting flush with the head, if I didn't already say that, before you start working these threads down. Go, nice and tight. Drop the rest of the bearing caps on. Make sure they are oriented correctly. Throw on the nuts. And we're going to run them down. There we go. Torque them again to 132 inch-pounds. There we go. That's it. And that is that. The camshafts are reinstalled, lubricated, and torqued to spec. Now, obviously, they are not currently sitting at top dead center. I will have to rotate them to top dead center before I reinstall the cylinder head. We will do that in the cylinder head installation video because I lent out my Vanos tools to a friend who is also rebuilding his head. So that's it. They're back on. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep it fresh, and I will see you guys later.
You should take it slow.
sort of want to keep it taut. But now we can turn the whole thing like that so fucking well. Wow. Alright, hold on. Fucking reboot. Alright.